Hey, we're back again, and this may be our toughest discussion yet, but you've stayed with me this far. Let's talk about understanding, are you ready for this? Understanding values and mission, your prayer mission statement, and your vision. And how do you translate mission and vision into strategy? And then how do you break that down into tactical pieces? I know. It's a lot more fun to pray. I agree with you. Somebody said the devil is not terribly frightened of our human efforts or credentials, but he knows his kingdom will be damaged when we start lifting our hearts to God in prayer. Prayer doesn't equip us for the greater work. Prayer is the greater work, so claimed Oswald Chambers. The greatest need, the late J. Vernon McGee said, for the present day church is prayer. Prayer is the vital breath of the church, and right now it is grasping for air. The church goes forward on her knees, and maybe one of the reasons we're not going forward today is that we're not in a position to go forward. We're not on our knees. Satan will not mind how we labor in prayer for a few days or a few weeks or even a few months if he can in the very last discourage us so we'll stop praying. George Mueller urged that you have to persist in this process, and you're getting an idea that this is not going to be an easy, quick thing. This is going to require a marathon. This is not a sprint. So what you got to have is, if you're going to build a house of prayer, you got to have a plan. And we want to talk about drawing your future by developing your values, your mission, and your vision. I know it seems far away from what you want to do. Let's just pray. I've heard it 1,000 times. But if somebody doesn't think ahead, not just to the next prayer meeting, but through the next 3 to 5 years, your prayer ministry is going to struggle and it'll probably fail. You'll just move from one good prayer activity to another, and you'll lack a clear sense of mission and vision and long-term strategy. This morning I got a cup of coffee and sat down by the fire, and I had one of those wonderful logs that you buy from the store that catches on fire, and around it I had some other logs. One had these splintery pieces. It caught the flames off of this store-bought starter log, and it flamed up. I watched it. I knew what would happen. I knew that eventually it would die down. It took a little while for it to dry that log out and heat it up, and then the substance of the wood itself began to burn. You'll get very encouraged by an upward flame of passion for prayer, but that'll sadly die down. And then you'll have to go to the hardcore substance of 5, 10, 15, 20% of the congregation that is determined to know God and to know Him intimately. And eventually that will change your entire church. You start with values, then you move to mission, then you move to vision, which is an expansion of your mission. Then you move to strategy, and then you unwrap the strategy one piece at a time. We'll talk about the differences between those things. Once you've hammered out your values and you've articulated a mission statement, you expand that into a vision declaration of your future prayer ministry, then you'll need that strategy. Vision is the big picture. Strategy is the big picture plan. Tactics are the steps. Values dictate why you do what you do, and they're determined not by what you say is important, but by what you're actually doing. A congregation that does not have regular prayer gatherings, a congregation that has no identified intercessors, a congregation that offers no prayer training, a congregation that prays only for a few minutes about personal needs and prayer requests on Sunday morning, that's a church that does not value prayer. They may value singing, 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes. They may value an offering. They'll take one, maybe two. They may value preaching 25, 30, 45 minutes of it, but they don't value prayer. You have to value prayer, and you know you value it by what you actually do. Here's a list of prayer values, and I want you to notice each one has a behavioral doing expression. You will have heard some of these values in the 7 markers of a praying church. Remember again, values are not constituted by what we articulate as important, but by what we demonstrate by our behavior. It's not a value until it impacts our behavior. If you don't practice it, you don't value it. Number 1, we value prayer in our church. So here's what we do. We feature prayer. We feature it in our worship. We make prayer the central element of our ministry. We are a praying people. Therefore, we nurture at home daily to be like Jesus praying. And we provide resources to help people with their daily devotional life, couples praying together, families praying, fathers blessing their children, training, nudging new and seasoned Christians to deepen their personal daily prayer life with God. We champion the practice of couples praying together, the establishment or reestablishment of the family altar that we lost 50, 100 years ago. Prayer celebrations in the home. Third, we believe we're a kingdom of priests. And we believe that prayer and worship is our highest calling. And that as priests, we are not only recipients of the blessing of God, but we are conveyors of blessing. Therefore, in prayer, we choose to pray for the favor and blessing of God, for His protective care upon the pastor, upon the church, upon the staff, upon the church family, upon our city, on the nation. We bless, we don't curse. We ask God not for what we deserve. Just like Jeremiah urged in Babylon, we pray for the goodness of God upon a city that doesn't deserve it, for grace, for mercy. We receive the blessing of God and we pass on the blessing of God. We value holiness and righteousness. And we recognize that our nation needs a revival that raises the level of moral sensibility and godly character. Therefore, we regularly and consistently cry out to God for a great awakening for our nation. A great awakening is different than a revival. A revival affects a church for 3 to 5 years. I'm not talking about a protracted meeting. I'm talking about God coming to the church. But it won't last more than a few years. A great awakening is when God comes not to the church, He comes to the city. And He wakes up the awareness in the larger context of our culture and who He is. Not since Azusa Street we had a great awakening. A great awakening is when God wakes up the awareness of Him. And even the pagans are talking about God. He brings His presence into the city. It's inescapable. It's like fog. It's everywhere. You can't get away from it. Language changes. Values changes. The fear of God returns. We need a great awakening. And one thing we know, prayer has preceded every great awakening we've had in our nation. We believe in the power of petition. We believe that God not only hears our prayers, but that God answers prayer. Therefore, we faithfully take the needs of others, the needs of the church, our own needs, the city, the world, before the throne of God, and we ask for grace. We provide a means whereby requests for prayer are taken seriously and held up and prayed over repeatedly, beseeching God for an answer. We believe in the power of intercession. Therefore, we identify, we train, we team, we deploy, we mobilize, we debrief intercessors. We ask them to undergird the church and all of its ministry, mission endeavors in prayer. We embed them in every ministry of the church. We believe that prayer is essential to the success of every endeavor, and that without Him, we can do nothing. And that whatever we do in His behalf without dependence upon Him is less than it might have been given dependence in prayer. Therefore, our rule is no one works unless somebody prays. We believe that the reception of the gospel unto salvation is not merely a cognitive issue. It's not a matter of clear arguing and rational arguments for the faith. We believe it's a spiritual thing. The God of this world blinded the minds of those who are without. And therefore we pray for the harvest, that blind eyes will be open to the gospel, that closed hearts will be open to the truth of Christ, and that the gospel will go forth in power out of prayer. We believe there's a definitive connection between the prayer and the harvest. Therefore, we insist that prayer must have a missional dimension. We need to pray for our lost loved ones, for our neighbors, for those who work around us, for the unreached of our city, for people groups who have moved here from all over the world, who have never heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. In Fresno, something like 50, 60 languages. In Dallas, 112 spoken in the public school system. The world has come here. They're living around us. We believe that God governs the world by the prayers of His people, that history belongs to intercessors. And so we are committed to pray for our city, for our mayor, for the state, for national leaders, about world conditions, about various global crises. These are our values. You may not want to adopt this statement. You may want to hammer out your own values. You may want to add to them or change the wording in some way. The real emphasis here is that you are doing the things that you say are valuable to you in the area of prayer. Now you translate your values into mission. Mission is what you're supposed to be doing. There are three elements of our mission that are very, very clear. Jesus said, "My house shall be a house of prayer for the nations." The three greats in the Bible. Number one is the Great Commission. We know it well. Go into all the world, make disciples of the nation, teach them, baptize them, induct them, make them not only converts, but make them disciples. This is sharing of the good news of God's love with those near and with those far. We call this the Great Commission. There's another great. It's the Great Commandment. What's that? Well, it's love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. Because the heart of your relationship with God is this love relationship. It's knowing His love and loving Him. And then loving your neighbor. In fact, Jesus went beyond that. It's not just loving your neighbor, it was loving your enemy, expressing God's love and God's care. The Great Commission is getting the truth of God out, the truth of who God is, the truth about our sin, the truth about judgment, the truth about Christ's death on the cross and His offer to us of the gift of salvation. The Great Commandment is about helping others sense the love of God by letting God's love flow through us. What's the third great? Well, it's the Great Commitment. The Great Commitment is from Paul. Pray for men everywhere, beginning with kings and those in authority, that we might live a peaceable life and that all men might be saved. Great Commitment, Great Commandment, Great Commission. Prayer changes us. Care, Great Commandment, God's love in us that causes us to reach out and care for others. This is the incarnational gospel. This is us living out the gospel. Great Commission, sharing, articulating, giving language to the good news of Christ. We've been doing Great Commission work without doing Great Commandment work. We've been doing Great Commandment work without doing Great Commitment work. It starts with prayer. God will start loving others through you. And then it ends with sharing the good news of Jesus Christ with those around you. And those three things will move you naturally through the process, fulfilling the mandate of Christ, my house will be a house of prayer for the nations.